ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to our closing keynote session, Implementing State and Institution-Wide Change for Adult Learners. I hope you've had an amazing experience at our summit today. I'm excited to introduce our new speakers. My name is Jacqueline Cortez Wang. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a proud daughter of Mexican immigrants, a mom of three, and a graduate of San Jacinto Community College. And I have the privilege of being ATD's Chief Strategy Officer. I'm honored to moderate today's session. As we all do, I have a very personal connection to today's topic. My mom had me at a very young age, but not that long ago started her education journey. My daughter had the opportunity to see her grandmother walk the stage at her community college graduation, and I've seen my mom's career trajectory change drastically because of the opportunities her education has given her. Today, I am honored to welcome our two speakers, Dr. Stacy Townsley, Associate Commissioner for Adult Strategy at the Indiana Commission for Higher Education, and Dr. Frances Villagran Glover, President of Southeast College Houston Community College. I'd love to begin by asking each of you to share what you see as the most critical to the future of our work in serving adult learners. Dr. Townsley, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Jackie, and welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. I'd like to highlight two key concepts that I've tried to champion in my work, both at the state and institution level, and that is learner-centric design or design thinking and systems thinking. From a design perspective, we're placing ourselves in the learner's shoes. We're recognizing, and minimizing the barriers to their educational attainment. One extremely useful tool to achieve learner-centric design is really literally mapping the learner journey across the education and workforce ecosystem. I'm going to use the term ecosystem and system interchangeably throughout today. But how are they navigating state agencies, higher education institutions, community organizations, employers, all the way from exploring what their next step might be to actually enrolling in a credential program through completion. And with a learner journey mapping process, you're really looking at the who, what, when, where, why, how of how those individuals are engaging. And then from there, you're figuring out ways to bake in that high touch human element support that we all know is critical to helping adults. With regards to that second concept, systems thinking, a useful thing to keep in mind is that at its core, system or ecosystem consists of information flows. Another term for systems geeks out there might be feedback loops, right? So when we think about systems change, think about it in terms of modifying the way that we're receiving information and feedback, so that we're consistently getting more comprehensive data, both qualitative and quantitative, from our organizations and learners to better inform our work. And I note, throughout that process, we're also learning to speak each other's languages, right? I'm sure we've heard it throughout today, learning outcomes on a syllabus are essentially the competencies and the skill sets that employers are looking for. So we need to be able to translate that. And one way to do that is to strengthen those communication and feedback loops within the systems. I'd note that too, as practitioners, we really have to learn how to see those systems. We have to be able to understand which stakeholders are involved and how they're influencing the way that information is shared throughout the system. And it's a practice that comes naturally to some, and it's more of a challenge for others. I will say, I did my dissertation work, doctoral studies around systems work, and it fascinates me. It probably doesn't fascinate everyone, but but there's certainly a growing body of literature and books out there, guidebooks around systems thinking and mapping to help you. And the learner journey mapping tool that I referenced is a pretty straightforward way of helping to see a system, right, as we think about working with adult learners. I'd throw out there too that, because our education and workforce ecosystem is fragmented and often difficult to navigate, that these two concepts, systems thinking and design thinking, are absolutely critical to our habits of thought and action. And that we each of us does have the capacity to develop, even if in partnership with others and joining others. A couple of brief examples that I'd like to share where we're trying to put into practice these concepts here in Indiana at the state level are targeted areas around supporting veterans and expanding the use and recognition of credit for prior learning as a way to help honor and recognize what adults are bringing to the table. I know briefly, I'll share, we stood up an education pathways task force for veterans about 4 months ago. It's really involving approximately 30 participants across different sectors, higher education, government, community organizations, employers, and even philanthropy is involved. And this seems to really be a unique opportunity to meaningfully engage and reimagine what it is to be a veteran or military affiliated individual going through this system of trying to further their education and step into that job or next job, better job, career path. We've divided out into working groups really geared towards those critical aspects of that learner journey, right? So how are they exploring? How are they finding out opportunities? So there's communication, navigation. Another area is, how when they are enrolling, how is their military training being recognized, right? So what are the barriers in place preventing them from capitalizing on that military training for credit for prior learning? And then lastly, the third work group around that work is based on student support. So once they're enrolled, how are they being supported throughout, even if it's for a short-term credential, if not an associate or a bachelor's or beyond. Again, so I think that's an example of taking those concepts and applying it to some of this work at the state level. Another area that we're rolling out yet even this month is really standing up another task force focused on credit for prior learning and really looking at that big ecosystem, breaking it out into pieces of, where are the trouble spots, where are the pain points, not just with the veterans, but just broadly. We're taking baby steps. So I would wrap up here just to say, so much of what is required in working with, in supporting adults is really building our capacity to see the bigger picture and really recognize the fact that we have diminishing returns on well-intended actions if we're just duplicating or there's a mismatch of our efforts across these different stakeholders within the system. So I'd say let's get past these old ways of thinking and doing.
Thank you, Dr. Townsley. Dr. Villagran Glover, would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and Stacy, if I can add, I love what you said about the design thinking. Well, we used it, and I just want to give a shout out to my Northern Virginia Community College colleagues there, where I served over a decade, and then also my Houston Community College. But Stacy, there is a phrase from Peter Drucker. He says about the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence itself, but to act with yesterday's logic.
I love it.
And we used, design thinking as Nova and here at Houston Community College for several years. And there's components to that, walking through the shoes of a veteran, walking through the shoes of somebody who doesn't have a GED or a high school diploma, and really understanding, the barriers, not necessarily the barriers that they have, because I love, how Karen and Barbara started out our plenary session with that growth mindset, with that, position of strength. And our students are resilient. In Houston, we've overcome hurricanes, ice storms, you name it, we've overcome it. And how to translate those skills and that life survival skills into their academic career. And we've used some of those components also with our business and industry. And so, Jackie, let me share just quick for our attendees. And keep in mind, I'm speaking from where I work in Texas, but wherever you are in the United States, while we're different, we're so much more similar. And so let me share my screen real quick. And it may not let me because I have to open system preferences. I'm sorry about that. But I can do without. Let's just do without, because I have to open up my system preferences and that'll take so long. So, the state of Texas, we're really, I've been in my position a year and a half, And Houston Community College is a large district. We have our service region encompasses over 200 miles radius. In the community, oh, thank you, Julia, whoever had it. And so, you know, over the past, Lordy.
Can you see the slides?
Yes, okay.
Great.
Let me turn off my phone. I didn't follow instructions. I thought that no calls would come in. So in the past decade, Texas added more residents than any other state. You know, we added over 4 million people, with 95% of the the population being communities of color. And to point out, 50% of that were our Hispanic students. So in my community that I serve and I oversee, over 55% of my community does not have a GED or a high school degree. So rather than seeing as challenges, we're seeing as opportunities for us to really engage in our community and our business partners. So in the state of Texas, we have a strategic plan. And for my Texans out there, my colleagues out there, we all know, you know, what we're really being focused on, especially for our adult learners. You know, by 2030, it's predicted that 60% of our jobs across Texas will require some type of education beyond a high school diploma. And today, only 48% of our working age population holds, and that's the adult learner, holds a post-secondary degree or certificate. So we talked about that throughout our plenary session, throughout the breakout sessions. There were some great discussions around building transparent career pathways. In my community, we're leveraging things in the high schools. You know, while we're talking to our high school seniors, we're also engaging their families, which is the adult learner. In the state of Texas, we're expanding short-term credentials of value, improving college and career readiness, really being intentional about strengthening those education and business partnerships, and improving college access and college completion. If you go to the next slide real quick, and I'll share with you some of our highlights at Houston Community College. Again, it takes a team effort. The work that we're doing at Houston Community College did not happen yesterday or when I got here. This was over a decade, and you know, kudos to the Houston Community College team who's online right now, as well as my colleagues who are on the Chancellor's Executive Cabinet. You know, so our campaign right now is framing the future and really doing that personalized learning pathways. Well, this is how serious we are. Our QEP, our accreditation, our quality enhancement plan is personalized learning. We're really working hard on creating that one door approach so that any student who comes to college, to Houston Community College, doesn't matter if you don't have a degree, have a master's, have a doctorate. A student is a student is a student. So really merging our continuing ed, our workforce, as well as our credit programs. One of the things I want to highlight is our Change Your Life for $20, which has been really successful the past 4 to 5 years. It is our Career for You program. And basically the $20 is their application fee, but they get all their tuition. There's several short-term credential programs that we work with our students who want to go into the workforce right away. So within 8 weeks, they can go into the workforce. Another thing that our chancellor built up, we have a Chancellor's Business Champions Council, which encompasses around 50 CEOs around the Houston region. And I like to share with you the overarching trend in the conversation. Doesn't matter if it's manufacturing, IT, banking, healthcare, the industry, the pattern of what we're hearing from our CEOs and business industry leaders is the interpersonal skills in a workforce that is missing, the skills gap. If you look at the skills gap, according to recruiters, it's those technical skills, interpersonal skills, the passion about their job. They're finding that they recruit and their new employees leave after the week because they don't like it. So how do we build within a community college community? How do you build that passion for the work that they're going into or the future work? Another thing that's just been exploding and which has really, really been great and adds to that passion for work is our apprenticeship program. We have partnerships with Amazon, with Apple, with Verizon, all those companies that all of us here are involved with across the country, but really being intentional. And we're working with the Department of Labor on apprenticeship hubs. And so right now it's exploded. It's only been in a year in existence and we have over 50 employers and more wanting to get involved. The other one that many of you may be familiar with is our corporate college. Many community colleges have a corporate college where we work directly with the employer on customizing training. Thanks to state funding, especially for small businesses who don't have a big budget. Our state funding pays for some training upskill training that employees need from small businesses. Our entrepreneurship initiative, small businesses, again, helping them grow their websites, helping them grow leadership development. The other one that I want to highlight, and we're very proud of, and this is as a result of not really wanting to go into the bachelor's of 4-year programs, but actually the industry telling us, please do this. There is a workforce need for it. And so in fall 23, Houston Community College will be offering the first bachelor's degree in AI and robotics. And we'll talk later about the implications on it.
We will. I appreciate you walking us through all of this. Clearly, Houston Community College has been doing a ton to support its adult learners. Would love to ask you a question. I know we've discussed this throughout the day today, but what is the potential impact on local communities if institutions and states can work together effectively to serve adult learners? And I'll hand it over to either one of you. Dr. Townsley, would you like to
Well,
start?
I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah.
I would say, one of the major impacts is, you're reaching individuals who may not otherwise have been reached because you're joining hands. 1 + 1 = 3, right? Here in Indiana, just real quick, I think just to share during the pandemic, the state joined forces with Ivy Tech Community College, which is where I was at the time. It's a statewide community college here in Indiana. And we leveraged the existing Workforce Ready grant that was geared towards high demand, high wage certificate programs. That was a last dollar program. We leveraged that, we flipped it, made it a first dollar program, and we partnered with the state to do outreach to those who are unemployed or underemployed. Had this huge uptake. And in the end, the funnel went like this, but over 3,000 individuals end up enrolling in some short-term high demand certificates. And we know that on average, those certificate earners have about a $7,000 wage premium increase. So that is one example of how we may not have otherwise been able to reach these individuals, but through partnership we could.
Thank you. I would actually like to ask Dr. Villagrán-Glover, you talked a little bit about AI, and so the labor market has changed dramatically over the past few decades and will continue to do so as advancements in technology, particularly in AI. And we've heard a lot about ChatGPT and how that's going to influence the labor market. My question is, how can we help adults prepare for and reimagine themselves in this new and constantly evolving world of work?
Right. And AI, as you know, is changing every day. I was invited to a think tank with 2 other community colleges 2 weeks ago at MIT and Harvard. And they intentionally invited community colleges to talk about that sense of belonging. We do a great job of creating that sense of belonging thanks to the ATD work and that holistic student support. And when it comes to AI is a disruptor, but it's also can be, it depends on your mindset, right? It can be really scary, but we can, as educators, we also need to embrace it. And so it's going to heavily impact, obviously, all our lives, whether we're a student or an employee of a community college. So that teaching and learning environment is going to change, trying to create that sense of belonging in a digital environment, because AI, they have Google and Microsoft just announced yesterday. They have embedded, you can go to meetings and bring your AI who will summarize your meetings for you, right? So what opportunities does it have for us? It has opportunities for all those skills that are missing in the workplace right now. The interpersonal, the creative problem solving, the ability not to think of the mundane, but also think of what's possible when you're working as a team. And so we're really excited about the possibilities. We're constantly, trying to keep up with it, just like everybody else. But my message is embrace it, see how we can leverage it, and be creative and use the time that we have to, like Stacey had mentioned in the beginning, is that design thinking, really being disruptive, yet for the benefit of the student journey and the ultimate student experience.
I have a brother that is 14 years younger than I am, and he is very excited about all things AI and Chat GPT, and it scares me, but you're telling me to embrace it and get
Embrace it.
excited about the opportunities. Dr. Townsley, what are your thoughts on the labor market and how it's going to change, and how will it be able to support our adult learners?
Yeah, that is also one of those scary things with my own son. He's like, well, but in terms of being nimble, right, flexible, so much of what we are doing, both at the state and institution levels, just trying to capture what does that picture look like for the individual through emerging labor occupations, where our available data, just aren't even there to be able to tell the story. So that, I think, in terms of what Francis was saying, that's where the industry partnerships are coming into play. This proliferation, or I should say strengthening of alternative pathways, apprenticeship, micro-credentials, et cetera. But I think as we talk about supporting adult learners, it's really about how are we making it easy for them to navigate everything that's out there. And it boils down to sharing data. I know that's can be kind of boring, but that's one of the biggest barriers to really knitting together all of these pieces. Even within an institution, it's sometimes difficult to knit together the credit and the non-credit side of things, right? Because the data aren't there. So developing simplicity through complexity, I guess, is a tag phrase I might use.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Data is not boring. We learned this morning that data are the summaries of thousands of stories. So I'm going to take that with me for sure. Can each of you share what you've learned in your roles about how states can support colleges in supporting and enrolling adult learners in high quality credentials?
Well,
not a small question.
Yeah. Francis, do you want to
I think, at the state level, high level, our roles, my role is this policy and really advocating for the students day in, day out. The funding, the Pell Grant, continuing ed funding. We've got to find a way to, like Stacy was saying, make it easy, the journey, but also through private funding, right? We have companies who here in Houston, I am just so grateful every day that I'll have a company come to me and say, here's a check, if we can I need 20 manufacturers, right? And here's a check. If we can get them through the pipeline, we'll pay for it. And so at the state level, changing our funding formula, looking at a student and not treating them as pockets. And our adult learners, we have 5 generations in the workforce right now, 5. And so adds the complexity, but also adds to the diverse of the workplace that we need. And so we really need to meet them where they are. Stacy mentioned the veterans. We have, folks who, like I said, don't have a GED or high school, but there's other pockets of adult learners that we need to meet, and we need to make it to serve the whole student. And, somebody mentioned I think Guillermo, AI is terrifying the labor market. What I mean by the labor market, it's really looking at your community and what's needed in the labor market in your own community. In Houston, we're all in oil and gas and space. And Stacy's, state may be different, but really working with employers in that state.
Yeah. And demand is hyper local. So whatever the state might come up with, it's got to be flexible enough to accommodate the differences across the regions, which is one of those things that we're looking at here in Indiana. We're having to reevaluate just the overall methodology of how we're identifying occupations. And then that, of course, informs and feeds a number of systems across not only workforce development, but also education and our K-12.
Yep.
But, and in terms of how the state might support these pathways, Francis already touched on most of what I was going to mention, but it is really helping to think through funding opportunities that are sustainable. I think one of the things we're working towards here in Indiana, although we have what is considered a promise grant for adults, it's a little bit underutilized because we had in place, we're changing it, some process barriers, like they had to go through a separate application, they had to take a certain number of credit hours. There's a little bit of play that goes on there, right? Because we have to get legislative approval for certain parameters and funding and that kind of thing. But it's really taking a look at, what are learners doing, and then how can we accommodate with these tools, and then helping to bring these other partners to the table, employers, et cetera.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a few of the challenges that exist. What do you see are the main obstacles that face our states in providing support to institutions?
Mhm.
I think, and I'm speaking because we're a coordinating body. We do not have any direct authority outside of, distributing financial aid and making budget recommendations. We're really here to help coordinate and promote a more consistent statewide approach to credit transfer, or, these types of issues that might support these larger infrastructure pieces. And I think outside of grant funding and coming alongside as a partner, it's really just working with those institutions that are willing to, I should say not willing to, but just who are ready to change kind of the way that they're engaging with their workforce development, for example, or their community partners. How can we help them change their role, or how they even perceive their role? I know here at the commission, we have a new commissioner. Chris Lowry came on board about a year ago. He's all about, let's become more of that convener. Let's become more of that connector, not only for our higher ed partners, but let's look across all of the sectors. And we have something that we're calling the Partnership Pentagon, that's looking at industry, government, philanthropy, community organizations, higher ed. So we are trying to change the way that we're showing up. And so we hope that we can help institutions in that way. That might be vague, but I don't know.
No, I like your show up. We just got to
Yeah.
be present and show up. In the state of Texas, we're changing our funding formula. Unlike Virginia, my friends in Virginia, where it's just one, 23 colleges in one system, we have 50 districts in Texas. So that could be is a challenge, but not a challenge. But related to the funding formula, now it's performance measures, right? Now it's not about bringing the student in the door, it's about outcomes. And so our funding is going to be based on outcomes. And so that's really going to be the driver to what we do, and our intentionality around how we designed our systems, right? Organizationally, as well as the student journey and our business partnerships, and our community. We can't do the work without our community-based partners. We have industry partners, but we definitely can't do it with our community-based partners who provide those. We have a partnership with the Houston Food Bank, right? We have partnerships with daycare centers because we can't, our capacity, right? Our resource capacity is limited, but we can leverage some of the talent out in the community.
Yeah, thank you. Having attended the summit all day, it's very clear that our audience with us today is diverse in many ways, including their role within their institution. Before we leave, would love to hear from you. What is one charge that you would want everyone in attendance to take away? What is that thing that you want them to act on, to remember, to walk away with?
I have two.
Okay.
And so
You didn't follow the directions.
I'm sorry. Did I have one? It goes along with, Karen and Rebecca were talking about this morning, rethinking and redesigning. When there's two things that seem separate, but they're really, really more alike, it's the call to action for those of y'all online. Not only looking for our students to have that passion for work, but we need to reinvigorate ourselves about a passion for work. Rebecca started with what's her why, and we need to remind ourselves, because sometimes we get into work, and we get exhausted, especially post-pandemic. But really invigorating our team members within the institution about the passion for work. And then the second one is embracing technology. That sense of belonging also includes the digital space, and embrace things like AI, embrace things like all those tools that are now out there that make our lives easier, so we can be more productive in society for our students.
My charge would be more at an organization level, but it could also be at a personal level. And, again, as the saying goes, we can't keep doing the same things and expect different results. So even if we have the most promising program out there to support adult learners, it won't be sustainable if we don't really address the underlying mindsets and kind of our habits of action within that system. So my challenge to the audience would be, first, reflect upon the work that your organization is currently doing in support of adult learners, and identify the role that it's playing as it relates to perhaps information sharing. Again, we talk about systems being made up of information flows. Is your organization one to support more data sharing, for example, or resource sharing? Or are you putting up barriers? Are you being a little territorial? Are you unwilling to share your data, that kind of thing? Secondly, I would ask that, once you've identified that role that your organization is playing in the system sandbox, consider how you might broaden and reimagine that role, like step outside of those boundaries that you're used to working in. And of course, you'd have to work with partners to do that. And I know everyone here is deep into partnerships. So again, it's just a reminder that we can have the best programs in the world, but it's a lot about the mindset and the growth mindset and how we show up.
Definitely.
Thank you. Thank you. I know a lot of us are writing those down. Thank you for today's session. I know we could probably keep this conversation going for much longer, but on behalf of ATD and today's attendees, thank you both for sharing your perspective, your experience, and your time to support adult learners. Both Dr. Townsley and Dr. Villagra and Glover have offered to provide their email addresses, so I'll put those in the chat, and I will turn it over to Julia Lawton.
Thank you. I know we are almost at the end and you've all been on Zoom for possibly since we started. So I appreciate you spending in a couple minutes just to let me close out. Thank you, Jacqueline, Dr. Townsley, Dr. Villagra Glover for a really good end to what I think has been a really wonderful day of learning. I think it was a really good way to close out the summit today. So before I let you go, I have a couple of notes and a really exciting sneak peek at an interactive tool that ATD has been developing for the field. So first, I'm excited to share some preliminary visuals of a new library of student success strategies that ATD is developing with generous support from the Lumina Foundation through the grant that Dr. Stout mentioned earlier, the Prioritizing Adult Community College Enrollment, or the PACE grant. This virtual library will be launched in June with a suite of strategies focused on adult learners, and we're going to continue to curate more content over the summer and fall to build that out. And even more exciting than the fact that you'll have access to this tool is that you can actually be part of the growth of the library. So there will be an easy way for you to submit your own examples and case studies of your college's work for adult learners through this tool so that we can highlight the exceptional work your college is doing. More information will be shared in late June as we make the library public and freely available. But for now, we invite any of you wanting to have your own strategies or examples of how your college is serving your adult learners to be featured in the library to email me directly at jlawton@achievingthedream.org. I believe my colleague Elizabeth is putting my email address in the chat right now. It's also on the screen. And finally, we want to hear about your experience at the summit today. Your input will help us continue to improve our virtual and in-person events for attendees. And so that we hope that you can spare 5 minutes of your time to complete the evaluation. The link is on your screen. There is a QR code on your screen as well, and we'll be sharing that in the email that follows next week. As a reminder, that email will also include all of the session recordings. That doesn't include the peer discussions, but it includes every other session, the recordings of those, the materials, the PowerPoint slides that were shared in those sessions, and any resources that were shared in the chat. We are going to create a resource list for you all. Finally, I want to extend my gratitude to all of our speakers, chat moderators, tech support staff for their work today, and to the internal ATD Planning Committee for helping make this such a valuable learning experience. Planning events like this takes a village, and I'm proud to have such an intelligent and supportive team as part of my group. And again, we'd like to thank the ECMC Foundation for their generous support that enabled us to make this event free to our network colleges and enabled us to, as I was told earlier today, reach over 1,000 registrants, many of whom were actually able to attend live today. I'll end by extending my gratitude to all of you and everyone else who registered for the event. When I first proposed the idea at the start of the Prioritizing Adult Community College Enrollment Grant, I was grateful to get immediate support from Dr. Stout and Dr. Parrish-Trent. We knew the topic was going to be timely. It was timely at the time, it's timely now. And our colleges were committed to serving adults in the community, but we did not anticipate such an overwhelming response for you all. And your engagement today means so much to us, and we commit to continue to support you as you continue this work. As one of the speakers in a session I attended earlier, Kenneth Glynn said this earlier today, we are a beacon of hope as community colleges for the adults in our community. We hope that this summit has given you some new ideas for how you can be an even brighter beacon for adults in your community. So thank you everyone for attending, and enjoy the rest of your day, my friends.